Well, thank you, Amir, and thanks to all of you for the talent, the resources that you're investing in our nation's future at this summit. And on behalf of HUD, it's a privilege for me to share our vision of how we're going to be unleashing economic opportunity across our country, specifically through the use of opportunity zones. Just a few weeks ago, I was here in Miami to visit a site at the Omni Community Redevelopment Agency District where developers are building more than 250 rental housing units with about 30,000 square feet of office space, plus ground floor retail space. And that, of course, means a lot of jobs. That new site was being developed with capital that was made available through a qualified opportunity fund. And it's a small portrait of a much bigger picture that this administration is painting with opportunity zones. Now, as many of you already know, opportunity zones are the result of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Act. And it's really offering a lot of powerful incentives for people to get involved in some of the economically distressed communities of our nation. Our aim is to make these investments a win-win for businesses and local communities. And a lot of people have complained and they've said, but opportunity zones, it's just a mechanism to help rich people get richer, and it doesn't help anybody else. I got to tell you, that's a bunch of crap. The fact of the matter is, the rich are going to get richer anyway because they're going to invest their money somewhere. So if the government can create an opportunity for them to take that investment that they were going to invest somewhere anyway and put it into places that traditionally have been neglected, that does become a win-win situation. Now, some 22 months after the initiation of the program, we're really seeing that there have been very few initiatives of this magnitude that affect so many people in modern history. Opportunity zones are now the home to 35 million people, 2.4 million of which are HUD-assisted individuals in all 50 states and 5 U.S. territories. That's approximately 10% of our population targeted for revitalization. And we're already seeing an economic renaissance in low-income communities. Qualified opportunity funds are committing tens of billions of dollars to reinvigorating these communities. And we're just getting started. For example, I was in Erie, Pennsylvania not long ago, and they have a $50 million qualified opportunity fund created to anchor the development of a new culinary arts center. And the excitement was palpable. A lot of the people who lived in Erie and were in other parts of the country actually came back to be able to participate. And in rural Nevada, Opportunity Zone funds are powering plans to develop listen to this, 4,300 acre distribution, manufacturing, and commercial center. Can you imagine how many jobs are going to be created through that? And in Wilmington, Delaware, we're seeing the construction of a very innovative vertical farm that will employ formerly incarcerated individuals. This administration is very concerned about second chances, particularly for people in our penal system. We have so many of our young people who wind up in the penal system, particularly the young men, with little in the way of education, little in the way of skills. When they come out, they still have little in the way of education and skills. So what do? The same thing they were doing before. And that's why the recidivism rates are so high. But I was at a reentry center in Jacksonville, Florida not too long ago, and there were 5 employers who committed to going to the prisons, establishing relationships with some of the prisoners, giving them education, giving them skills, and giving them a job. So that when they came out of prison the next day, instead of going back to their old associations, they went to their new job. And they proved to be such effective workers that today, instead of five employers doing that, they have 135. And they have more jobs than they have people coming out because they've proved to be such effective workers. Those are the kinds of things that really make a difference in our society because our people are our most important resource. And then in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, they're planning a hotel project in conjunction with one of the local HBCUs. Chicago, they're building thousands of new affordable housing units. Los Angeles is building new buildings. I was in St. Louis not too long ago, and an abandoned foundry was the nidus of the community redevelopment. And most importantly, the governor was there, who was a Republican. The mayor was there, who's a Democrat. Representatives were there. It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican when it comes to fixing these areas and giving opportunities to our people. And that's something that we really need to emphasize. The list of cities is growing that are really benefiting from this. And it's not just private companies pouring capital into opportunity zones. Private foundations are getting into the action too. For example, the Rockefeller Foundation has made grants to 6 cities as a part of the Opportunity Zone Community Capacity Building Initiatives. Those cities are Oakland, Dallas, St. Louis, Newark, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C. And those grants will allow each city to hire a Chief Opportunity Zone Officer as part of its economic development team. And when I think about the Rockefeller Foundation, it reminds me of something that happened a long time ago in this country. A lot of people outside of this country were criticizing us because you had the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and the Fords and the Kellogg's and the Carnegies and the Mellons and these very rich people, and then you had everybody else. And they said, you can't run a country like that. You got to have an overarching government that receives all the funding and then equitably redistributes it. Have you ever heard anything like that before? Well, at any rate, they did not understand this country. This country is very different than most other countries because all of those names that I just gave you and many others, instead of just enriching themselves and passing money down to the next generation, they invested in the infrastructure of our country. They invested in the transcontinental railroads and the textile mills and the seaports and the factories that helped create the most powerful and dynamic middle class the world has ever seen, which rapidly propelled us to the economic pinnacle of the world. But it didn't stop there. They built schools, universities, libraries, museums, art galleries, the stuff of the American dream. And that's the reason that, you know, America is the last place in the world where we need to be talking about class warfare and all these other kinds of warfare where people are trying to divide people up. This is a place of opportunity. And that's what we need to concentrate on, not allow ourselves to be divided up. You know, in terms of other foundations, the Kresge Foundation also announced that it's providing $22 million in investment funds focused on social impact, specifically in opportunity zones. One of the 2 partners in that impact fund, Community Capital Management, is based in nearby Fort Lauderdale. And together, those managers announced earlier this year plan to raise and deploy more than $800 million in capital nationally within opportunity zones. So you can see there's still a lot of people with big hearts who are concerned about the welfare of all of our people. And it's fantastic to see what Miami is doing. Last month, the city joined the National Opportunity Zone Academy, which was created with a $400,000 grant from the Rockefeller Foundation. Its goal is to build networks of peers and attract responsible investments for projects that also generate economic stability and mobility for local residents. I also understand Miami's City Affordable Housing Master Plan calls for local governments to leverage resources through peer networks like the National Opportunity Zone Academy, charting a pathway to prosperity that is consistent with community needs. When you put all these data points together, a clear picture emerges. There's a full court press from all sectors of society converging on opportunity zones to make them not just a premier investment opportunity today, but for the entire decade ahead. This is long-term incentives. As you know, you leave your investment in for 5 years, you get a 10% decrement in the capital gains owed on that initial investment. You leave it in for 7 years, that goes up to 15%. You leave it in for 10 years, you don't have to pay any capital gains on the new money that was realized. So this is really a good long-term plan that is very different from anything else. And also, if you're investing your money long-term, you're not just going to invest it and then come back 5, 7, or 10 years later and say, how's it doing? You're going to be very interested in how it's doing, and you're going to stay involved. Those are the kinds of things that are making the difference. To ensure opportunity zones reach their full potential, last December, President Trump, by executive order, created the White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, whose mission is to maximize the impact. And I'm privileged to chair that council. Scott Turner, the former NFL running back, is our executive director. And it's good he was a running back because he's running all over the country and working with leaders so far in more than 40 cities to make sure that this is a team effort. To date, the council has taken more than 160 different actions across agencies to increase the benefits in the opportunity zones. And these are actions like new grant preference points in opportunity zones, updated loan qualifications, reduced insurance application fees, and a whole lot of other things. But opportunity zones don't just help us build new homes, they help us preserve the current housing stock that millions of Americans depend on. And one program that HUD administers in this regard, of course, some of you are familiar with, is the RAD program, the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, designed to stem the potential losses of public housing and other subsidized housing due to the growing backlog of unfunded capital needs. We were losing about 10,000 public housing units per year. RAD allows public housing authorities to creatively deploy the limited funds they have to leverage public and private debt and equity to address their critical backlog of public housing capital needs. In many cases, to fully modernize the facilities. Until we implicated the RAD program, America's aging housing stock was at extreme risk of being lost. And the capital needs of those properties were far beyond anything we could expect to get from Congress. RAD provides us with a solution to preserve this critically needed housing so it remains a permanently affordable fixture for future generations. And programs like RAD recognize one very important thing. There's a lot more money in the private sector than there is in the government. And the government should be there to facilitate the use of private sector money to improve society. Now, through RAD, public housing authorities have converted well over 117,000 units, and in the process secured funding for over $7.6 billion of improvements in public housing portfolio. Without RAD, it would have taken 46 years for housing authorities to complete the same level of unit repairs and renewals. And I'm happy to announce that HUD will soon be releasing our final evaluation of the RAD program. It's been around for 7 years now. This evaluation suggests that RAD significantly boosted the capital investments and improved conditions of distressed housing. And the people have noticed the difference too. For example, in a survey of 298 residents at 18 RAD converted properties, 80% of the tenants were satisfied with their unit and development. And that's a tremendous figure in public housing, as some of you know. The RAD program has been particularly beneficial to America's opportunity zones. More in this fiscal year, more than half of the conversions have taken place in opportunity zones across the nation. And it's just one more great example of how opportunity zones are not an isolated initiative. They intersect with the very core programs at the heart of what HUD does. One of the key takeaways from the past 2 years of developing this initiative is that opportunity is a fantastic tool for building unity. Opportunity has no color, no creed, no picket line, no party line. It's about one people under one flag looking out for each other. Ultimately, opportunity zones are about people and the distressed communities that can be uplifted. And poverty impacts all of us, either directly or indirectly, and so does prosperity. And we need to change one from the other. You know, as a youngster, there was nothing but poverty all around me. That's all I saw all the time. It's all I heard about all the time. It was the fact that my mother made me start reading books that really changed my perspective in terms of where the opportunities were. And it's time for us to make sure that we create the opportunities for all the people in our nation, because they are our most important resource. Opportunity zones were created to help our nation's hardest hit communities, but also to recognize the fact that the government doesn't always have all the answers. Through opportunity zones, federal government is helping foster partnerships between people who perhaps never sat down at the same table together. Community leaders, public housing advocates, investors, builders, state and federal officials. The conversations I've had have been very encouraging, the work already taking in communities across this nation. And I encourage you to go to opportunityzones.gov and look up the opportunity zones in the areas where you are and the opportunity funds and the things that can be done, and to really get involved in these win-win deals. They're so important. And we need to build in this country right now community through opportunity. Listen to those two words, community, opportunity. They both end with the same 5 letters, U-N-I-T-Y, unity. Isn't that something that we need in our country right now? Think about it. And we need to recognize that we, the American people, are not each other's enemies. You know, just because you might have a different opinion, it doesn't make you someone's enemy. And I always say, if 2 people agree about everything, one of them isn't necessary. So, you know, everybody is necessary. We just need to learn how to talk intelligently and recognize that a rising tide floats all boats. Let's not try to segregate ourselves. And we also need to realize that this is a very powerful nation. The only people who can destroy us are us. And we all have a sphere of influence, and we need to use that in a very positive way. You know, have you ever noticed with ants how sophisticated they are and the societies that they build, these big complicated nests? They're quite industrious. But there are black ants and there are red ants. They're both very industrious, but what do they do when they see each other? They fight. Why? Because one is red and one is black. Now, have you ever looked at an ant's brain? Get a dissecting microscope, put the ant's head under there and open it up and look for its brain. You're going to be looking a long time. That's their excuse. What's our excuse? We can do a heck of a lot better. And we need to start implanting the can-do attitude in America, the spirit of cooperation, spirit of compassion. And it's amazing because the can-do spirit will return to America and we will truly have one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Secretary Carson. Oh, yes, that's fine. Give him a good cheer. That was nice. That was very nice. Well, I know everybody here wants me to ask more questions about ants, so we'll get started with that. But we have a few questions for the Secretary. One of the things that's always confused me about the opportunity zones has been like the designation of them, right? So there are areas, there's 70 opportunity zones in the Miami-Dade County. And some of them are in areas that are not necessarily, you know, they don't need money necessarily, like the design district that's designated as an opportunity zone. How do those designations come about?
Those designations are made by the governor of each state in consultation with the various officials in their state. And we wanted it to be done that way rather than at a federal level because each state should have a very good idea of which are the parts of that state that need the most stimulation. So that's the reason that it was done that way.
You previously told The Real Deal that HUD would give preferences to developers who will build affordable housing in opportunity zones when it comes to certain grants. Has HUD actually enacted that preference?
Not only is HUD in the process of enacting that, but the council that I mentioned that the president established, the White House Council, has 17 members, 13 federal agencies as well as state and federal agencies. And we're all looking at the various grants that we give and how they can be appropriately applied and used to incentivize people to build affordable housing. Affordable housing is an incredibly important thing right now. And it's not that we're not very innovative people who have the ability to create the right kinds of things. You look at 3D printable houses, you look at the tremendous progress that's been made with manufactured housing, you look at modular housing. We can do amazing things and they're beautiful. The problem is the restrictions that keep us from using them. And that's why it's so important to work with the federal, state, and the local agencies to look at. Many of these regulations are old, and they've been on the books for many years, and they're not even relevant anymore. Like there's one common regulation that says all the people who live in the house must be related to the owner. Well, why did they put that in there? Because people were afraid of brothels. Well, I don't think anybody's afraid of brothels anymore. So that's really doesn't need to be there. But you know, there are a lot of noise restriction things that are not particularly helpful. Height, density, historic preservation, all of which are important. But you don't layer one on top of another. You replace one with another that's more relevant, and this is where we have a problem.
The administration is talking about cutting some funding to HUD. How do you incentivize affordable housing in opportunity zones so that developers actually have a reason to, participate?
Well, first of all, there's been a lot of talk about the HUD budget being cut, but since I've been here, it's just gone up. But
You're a spender.
but the fact of the matter is, we do want to make sure that the monies are used in the most efficient and effective way. And as far as the Opportunity Zone program is concerned, it is not really a government program. Government helps to facilitate it, but it's really the private sector. You know, the private sector in this country is amazing in terms of their ability to innovate and their entrepreneurial spirit. When you put something in front of them, they will figure out how to use it in a very effective way. And we encourage input from different people, but the things that I've seen around the country already are just so spectacular. And you know, I was thinking about Salt Lake City, for instance. Through an opportunity fund, they built a multi-purpose building with a concentration on people with Down syndrome, with jobs for them. And it's incredible that these people actually can become independent and support themselves with the appropriate type of surrounding support. Those are the things that make a difference. That's who we are. That's what America is. We're not these people you see on the 6:30 news running around spraying people with stuff and hitting people. That's not who the vast majority of Americans are. And we're very innovative, we're very creative, we're very compassionate, and that's what we need to start emphasizing and stop listening so much to the purveyors of hatred and division.
I think everybody can agree with that. HUD recently announced a new rule that would significantly expand the amount of FHA loans available to condo purchasers. I think a lot of people in this audience, and Miami especially, would definitely benefit from that. Why did the administration decide to make this move?
Well, you know, condominiums are frequently the first step into the home ownership market. And of course, they come at a price tag that is less than a single family home in many cases. And very good for millennials, first-time home buyers, but also for some of the elderly who want to age in place. And that's why, you know, we've worked very hard to get the condo rule in place over the last couple of years, trying to minimize any risk associated with it. A condo unit can have 10%, in some cases up to 20% of these units that have been individually certified.
And you know, you were a brain surgeon before, as we all learned earlier. Did you ever think that you said you retired, you moved to Palm Beach Garden? Did you ever think that you would have this phase of your life happening right now?
No, if 6 years ago you had told me I was going to end up in government, I would tell you you're crazy. But you know, God has plans in our lives, and you know, this is a real opportunity for me because you can take an agency like HUD that before I got there had no CFO for almost a decade.
Wow.
And inappropriate financial controls, and was concerned primarily about how many people can we get into this program and under this roof. To change that to something that is run like a business and with a mission of not how many people we can get into programs, but how many people can we get out of programs and be self-sufficient.
Got a lot of fans here. Do you feel that, when we were speaking earlier, I asked you, is it 4 years enough to make real change happen, especially with development and building? Do you feel like you're making any progress?
We're making tremendous progress. You won't hear about it on the news because it's good stuff.
Well, tell us. Tell us what you're most proud of.
Well, I'll tell you that in a minute, but go to HUD.gov and look under accomplishments. You will absolutely be blown away in terms of what's going on. But you know, we're very proud of the fact that we've been able to bring fiscal responsibility into HUD. We have tremendous staff. I have by far the best people. We have the ugliest building, but the best people. And it makes all the difference in the world. And we are being able to make the transition to self-sufficiency and really begin to emphasize those programs. The Envision Centers are popping up all over the place now, where we take advantage of things that already existed, but people didn't have access to them, and bring them under one roof to a place where people can access them. where they can refer to each other. And that's the kind of thing that will allow people to climb out of a state of dependency.
And in terms of what you're most proud of since you've been in government, what is the thing that you accomplished at HUD that you're most proud of?
I would say creating an atmosphere where people aren't enemies. Do you still have some embedded people who just are pugilistic no matter what? Yes. But many of those people have gone. And some of the most bothersome people, I just say a prayer and they disappear. So, that works extremely well.
Well, thank you so much, Secretary Carson. I know you flew down especially for this event, so I especially want to thank you for that. And I know you're about to hop on the plane back. So I think the real deal cost the taxpayers a lot of money today. But we all appreciate you for being here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for what you do.
Yeah.